It is very, very impressive.
Magnificent.
Majestic.
Sort of cast back to childhood memories of mucking about in the woods and things.
I was studying at the Royal College of Art and we were doing some work on climate change, and I started to research and get quite interested in the topic, and I met up with Andrew Mitchell, who's actually an old friend, but he's been working in global canopy projects for about 30 years, and thought perhaps I could start looking at that in terms of visually expressing that, the destruction of rainforests.
I realised a few years ago that it just wasn't working. Everything we've tried to do in the conservation movement has not stopped the onslaught on the world's rainforests, disappearing at the rate of about 13 million hectares every year. That's the size of England, going up in smoke every year. Football pitches every second. And this amount of smoke that is caused when trees are cleared and burned for access to their land is releasing giant amounts of carbon up into the atmosphere.
Ghana is a very interesting country actually, because it's lost 90% of its primary rainforest over the last 50 years. And that is such a shocking figure.
And that's the thing that has changed the game in the last few years, because people have realised that climate change is a massive problem, but they didn't know that the burning of rainforests was one of the major drivers of climate change. It's bigger than the entire transport sector.
That was frightening. And I just felt also, like everybody else in the world, that our natural resources are being destroyed. And when they're gone, they're gone.
And then we got talking, and we thought, well, why don't we bring a whole rainforest tree to London and put it in Hyde Park? And that was a pretty crazy idea, and we sort of left it there. Well, Angela contacted me after that and then said, do you know what? I'm going to bring a whole lot of rainforest trees from Ghana and bring them to London.
I got thinking that maybe I could go into a logged rainforest and bring out the sort of the stumps, as it were, so that the missing trunk would kind of, in some way, be symbolic for the removal of the lungs of the planet. From there, I started looking at the possibilities of where I might get these rainforest tree stumps from. And that took me virtually on the computer all around the world. And finally, I was introduced to someone actually who lives in Oxford, my hometown, who runs TimMed, which is an importer of tropical hardwoods, Simon Feynman. And he was doing business in Ghana. And he thought that he could perhaps strike up a link with myself and someone called Gassan Bitar, who runs a company called John Bitar in Ghana.
In Ghana, we have a very strict and strong regulation on forest reserves, one of the best in the world. You cannot just fell any tree you want when you're given a forest reserve. The forestry division of Ghana, they work the formula out. We give them the summary of the trees available. They work out the yield and approve it. And every tree is inscribed with the number on it. And we are only allowed to enter a compound once every 40 years.
How would this be seen in Europe if they were going to give me these tree stumps and I was taking them over into this urban setting, into London, into Trafalgar Square, into such an incredible sort of site? How would this be seen? Would they be seen as the evil loggers? Even if I promised that I would try very hard to get across the message that they were exercising selective logging, I could still see that this was a major problem. So quite a few times along the way, I thought the whole project was off, really. It had to be down to their cooperation. And if I didn't get their cooperation, they could just say no at any stage and the whole project was over. I went there with a friend of mine, Sheila McNamara. We set off without an address. We were just told to turn up at this particular village. I was given a very sketchy map, and we should just telephone from that point, and he would give us directions on how to get there.
I was so mad. I thought somebody had better go with her in case she went off into the forest and was never heard of again. The men at the Forester workers who had trainers on, you know, little T-shirts, they absolutely collapsed with laughter when they saw us because we were geared up to the nines and it was very hot. But we had all these, and I had a mosquito net to cover your head, you know, which I couldn't see out of actually.
And they were just doubled up with laughter.
They were killing themselves laughing, and they said, "Oh, you'll not see anything. As soon as the machine moves in, every animal takes flight." And then 50 yards on, a scorpion, and they told us if it bit you, your nervous system was totally paralysed. You were dead in 15 minutes.
I had faith in this project, to be honest with you. Other people thought it will never work. If she had the will, it could work. And I encouraged her. And from my point of view, it was the awareness. So I supported it. I mean, I thought it worked. Other people thought it was far-fetched.
He had the guts to do it. And he could see that there was a lot of positive aspects, angles could come out of this. And all the way along, he knew that I was doing it for positive reasons.
People believe that at the other end there must be money to do something like this. I mean, why would you transport roots? You know, looking at the people, how people think, why transport roots? They have no use. But in her case, it was for this project.
Logistics of, well, not just the machinery, but the manpower and having to get them clean, because part of the import restrictions, of course, to get the trees into this country, we had to ensure that all the soil, that they're free of all soil. So we had to have teams of people in the forest cleaning the trees, the roots, because you imagine the size of these root balls. The big denia root ball spanned 20 feet. Huge. So imagine the amount of earth on that, because most of the trees were naturally fallen for this installation. And then we had to get all the trucks in, the diggers in, what they call skidders in, to try and remove the trees and get them onto the low loaders.
We had to have a police escort because they were wider than the normal trailers. Then at the port also there was the job of offloading the trees, the stumps, and bringing in the fire brigade, because customs will not allow, I think, soil to be transported, something. 9
of them got down to Takoradi. 1 left, would not leave the forest, and that was the giant denia. All sorts of problems. The engines were blowing, and the local people are very superstitious, and they got very worried about this, and they called in the village elder in his traditional dress, and they had a bottle of schnapps, Ghanaian schnapps. And I said, "What is this?" And they said, "Well, it's called the pouring of the libation, and it's a traditional ceremony. During this ceremony, there is the pouring of this alcohol, and they invoke their ancestors, but also the goddess of the river Suhuma, which is flowing through this concession." Anyway, they said that after the pouring of the libation on the denia, the tree moved peacefully out of the forest. And then, of course, it got onto the road. It was still 350 kilometres, and I was still pulling my hair out. Is it going to make the ship? I'm afraid it bashed into a taxi along the way, and it took down some overhead cables between 2 towns. But it did make it.
I felt this could be an electrifying experience for young kids from school, right through to politicians, if we could get them into Trafalgar Square and get them to walk around a dead rainforest and say, look, this is what we're going to have left unless we act. It could be very powerful.
how are you going to present a 20-ton tree, one tree weighed 20 tons, to get that into Trafalgar Square on a platform in front of the National Gallery? Well, that night in Trafalgar Square, when I went down to see the trees arriving, that was just so emotional when I saw the big Denia coming around the corner in the darkness with the red flashing lights. Unbelievable. I just had to pinch myself because I couldn't believe it's actually happening after so many months of really sweating it out. And my children were there, my husband was there, and it was just to have a family there it was very, very moving. It was incredibly moving. This beautiful great-grandfather of all trees had made its way, it was arriving into Trafalgar Square. Having come so far, that was an extraordinary moment. I suppose I hadn't really imagined the privilege to have one's artwork in Trafalgar Square was extraordinary because it was an open air, it became an open air art gallery.
In the morning, rain had fallen on the square. It was glistening like a mirror. And you could see the columns of the great buildings, these great colonial, massive, powerful buildings that had actually been responsible for cutting down these trees so many years ago, reflected in the light, in the water on the square. And there were these trees on white plinths, challenging everybody around there, and it was silent. And just a few people started walking through, commuters on the way to work. So, bloody hell, what's that in the square? That shouldn't be there. And then later, school children on their way to school. And their teacher stopped them and said, what's this? What's going on? And he said, it's a rainforest tree. A real one? And they started touching, feeling, smelling.
People got different things from it, that was for sure. And that's what I wanted. I thought that no response is right or wrong. Some people came along, they saw it purely for its ecology. Some people came and that had deep-seated meaning for them, if it was geographically, culturally, politically, and it was exciting for them to see it, to see this nature in its raw form. And other people very much felt it was a political message.
And it was an incredibly moving experience to see all these people going through the square, and I watched them all day and talked to people. And for them, I think, just to be able to reach out and touch nature and to be reminded that this is not the sort of forest we want to see in the future. And there is absolutely no doubt that it really did have an extraordinary effect on the people walking through the square all week.
I was just amazed to see tree roots in the middle of Trafalgar Square, and so big.
Quite a stunning position for them when you walk through and see them. So it is beautiful.
Very intriguing, and you want to know more about it, and then when you learn more about it, it's just so sorrowful, really emotional and sad.
It's given the opportunity to thousands of people to actually see these things and actually sort of look at them, touch them, read about them, and actually think, well, actually these things are being destroyed, and we live on the one planet, and these large trees, they help balance the gases, the carbon dioxide, the oxygen and so forth. They're part of our livelihood, and if you carry on chopping them down, then you're risking the whole environment, the whole ecosystem of which we're part.
Very, very proud of the fact that someone's actually decided to put Ghana in a very positive light to show that it's not all bad in Africa.
Minimum sort of 2,000 people an hour over the sort of core periods of the day will have seen the installation.
And it is an incredibly inspiring exhibition, and there's great beauty to these trees, and I hope it does inspire people, and I hope they put pressure on me and political leaders, because we need the best agreement we can get at Copenhagen, and in particular one that will have an impact on deforestation. So thank you very much for talking to us. It's a brilliant exhibition, and I'm sure you'll inspire a lot of people.
Climate change is the biggest single issue that this generation of politicians faces, and it's right that artists are using their skill to inform people about the challenges that we face. This was a particularly interesting thing. I mean, it was such a feat of logistics apart from anything else. And there are very, very few people, either in London or Copenhagen, who've ever seen the root of a rainforest tree. I certainly hadn't before. So that was a very novel experience. And what a powerful image it creates.
Things are going on with the environment around the world, and it's a real thing rather than talking about it and then not being able to show it. Because talking about something and not showing it is worthless.
The inspiration has to be from the artist, not from the politics of it. If it's the other way around, it lacks integrity. To me, this work really had integrity because it was a work of art about a political issue, a social issue, an economic issue. And I think a very powerful way of conveying that.
This makes people aware, makes people start asking questions and looking. So something like this, I think, is very, very, very important.
I do hope this message gets through to the decision makers. Well, they went immediately from Trafalgar Square up to Copenhagen. It was the UN Climate Change Conference. That was attended by over 11,000 delegates from 192 countries. So it was the whole spotlight of the world really was on Copenhagen for that 2 weeks. And the rainforest trees were there. It's all about storytelling, and my work does seem to be a collision between science and art. And a lot of these scientists just can't believe that what they are doing is being visually expressed. So they've just been amazing, really. I feel very emotional about the trees. I want them all to remain together. They're a group, they're a family. And I very much, although they are from Ghana, I've stressed all along that they're really the symbols of all rainforest trees from throughout the world.
I came by on my bicycle and I just had to stop because it was so big and so strange. And
it's amazing. Instead of all this crap that I've put up on the other square.
Emotionally, it's worth it because it makes us think, what is it all about?
If you can take something like this to the people, you can reach them in a way that they just wouldn't be reached if this was presented on a website or somewhere else.
It makes me feel sad, actually, that we've come to this point, that we've had to come to this point. And yeah, I hope it does affect politicians from a tree root level.
I hope, at least, that the younger ones, the young people, will begin to think, because many of the young people are quite influenced by it.
I'd like to see them stay together as a group, but like a little travelling embassy, like they're ambassadors for rainforest trees. And of course my dream would be for them to carry on being shown in urban settings, if possible, where they do make this, where this incredible juxtaposition does make its impact. And for them to travel to various countries. But I don't know what's going to happen to them now. And here we are now in Oxford, in July. I mean, it's just fantastic having this in my hometown. We were going to use this space in a way it had never been used before. It's fantastic because Oxford has allowed us a year in this place, and a year is such an incredible time.
We've had other art installations. We've had a Mark Wallinger here about sort of 8 years ago, but we've never had anything as big on the lawn that has actually changed the way the lawn has been looked at and everything else. No, it was a major undertaking for not only the museum, but the whole university, I think.
I don't think there's a forest that's moved this much since the forest moved in Macbeth from Burnham Wood to Dunsinane, and it's pretty impressive that she's been able to achieve this. And one of the things that, having seen it in both places, it really is quite different here. No less evocative, no less powerful, but it's quite different. It has a different feel. It is in a different scale, but it's remarkable.
This whole exhibition is really a collaboration of various departments in the Oxford University. So he was very keen on that collaborative approach, and here it was.
When I buy a tabletop from one of those amazing trees that we've seen out there, you have to remember that there are 6.8 billion people on the planet. The multiplier is what is changing it, just like that snowflake in the avalanche. One snowflake doesn't do it, but we're all responsible, or nobody's responsible.
It's important for all of us and our students and the school children, because hundreds of school children come to the museum every day, and it's important for us to realise actually how small we are.
I mean, it's going to be a bit like an open-air laboratory. That's how they're treating it at the moment. There was a chap out yesterday, actually, from the Natural History Museum, and he was terribly excited because he'd found some specific weevil, dead weevil, I hasten to add. And then there's quite a few people from the Environmental Change Institute working on them, postgraduate students.
My first contact with the ghost forest was walking by Trafalgar Square, and I saw the trees there. And then a few months later, I met Angela Palmer by chance, and I had a talk with her, and she told me that she was the artist of this project, and I found out that precisely what Angela wants is to raise the awareness, the attention of the need to protect the rainforests of the world, which is a cause I fully support. Half of Colombia's territory is rainforests. So whatever is done to protect the rainforests of Colombia and of the rest of the world, I support, and I want to be involved.
One of the things artists don't really talk about a lot, and I've been working in art schools for 30 years, I've never known anyone to have a discussion or a debate or a conference on curiosity. And yet it's one of the most major factors for artists and for the audience who go to see what the artists make. And I think curiosity is stirred by those things.
That's the merit of Angela's work, that she has been able to use her art to promote this awareness of the need to protect the environment. And maybe some artists have tried something similar, but probably not as impressive as Angela has done with her work, as attractive, as massive in terms not only of the size of the trees and the display, but of the strength of the message, which I think is very, very powerful.
It's astonishing in concept and it's astonishing in presence. those things are not always go hand in hand. They sometimes, one is in advance of the other, but this time it really works. And the more you learn, the more you see, the closer you get, the more information is fed to you, and the more imaginative it becomes. So when we're told something like the size of a tree or where it's from or what it weighs, it doesn't make it more matter of fact, it makes it stranger. I think the thing about the ghost forest is you're in the presence of probably some of the strangest things you're ever likely to see, ever. And they're on your doorstep.